congrats on the season.
Thank you.
We cannot talk about anything beyond the first 3 episodes. So let's jump in on that. I have a few questions that actually sort of don't pertain. These are bigger questions that will not, so hopefully you won't mind answering.
Not at all.
I'm very curious, and I might have to edit out what I've already just said. So have you guys figured out, or have you thought about if Homelander has any weaknesses?
We have. That's been an ongoing discussion in the writer's room. At the moment, there aren't many physical ones, but there's so many psychological ones that's what we kind of lean to. That, Anthony has said many times, and I agree, that Homelander is the weakest character in the show. So we've never really gotten into the how do you stop him physically, but there are a lot of ways to stop him psychologically.
Have you thought about if he ate something that was bad, will he get food poisoning? Do you know, like...
I don't think he will. I mean, someone just came up with a pitch the other day in the room of, is it even possible for him to get drunk? And I was like, I don't think so, actually. I bet it can't be possible. He's just, he's physically perfect. So there isn't much. But again, I think, he finds his human vulnerability so hateful, and he hates that part of him, and he tries to subsume it, and yet it is part of who he is. And so he hates a part of him that he can't ultimately control, and so that kind of leads to a snake's nest of psychoses. So that at the moment, that is his current weakness.
Got it. You guys have a show Bible that sort of tells all the characters you've introduced and weaknesses, powers? Is there one of those kind of things that you've analyzed, that kind of stuff, or is it sort of only when it comes up in the writing process?
No, we have our writer assistant Logan, who's a really smart and good writer on his own. He keeps track of everything at any given moment. So writers' rooms are just, for those who don't know, writers' rooms are just conversations. You just sit around and chat about what you think would be cool in the story, and does it hit the themes you want. And it's mostly my job to be the talk show host. What do you think? That's interesting. Tell me your response. And so when details come up, we say, oh, wait, I forget. What is the deeps? This, hey, Logan, what is it? And he'll have it almost on immediate recall. So it's not like we have this big Bible in front of us. It's much more informal, but we do all have the information at the ready if we need it.
Have you guys figured out how many people on the planet actually have superpowers?
It's very small. We spoke about it early because even in the pilot, I think they put a number on it. I think it was there were 300 active heroes, which tells me that, there's maybe a couple thousand tops worldwide. I mean, it might be 1,000. I think Vought has been pretty selective about who they give V to. And I think Homelander was only able to get so many doses around the globe. So I actually think it's a very small number.
It does seem like with the beginning of season 2 and the first 3 episodes, and from the last season to this season, that there are some adults that are being injected with Compound V. Is it one of these things where anyone who gets the injection, it works on them?
Yeah. No, part of the journey of this season is, I don't think it's spoiling anything to say, is Vought is hoping to get a more stabilized Compound V. Homelander says it at the end of last year, which is there's a reason they don't give it to adults very often. And this year you'll even see, kind of coming up in an upcoming episode that's not in the first 3, you'll see firsthand what the effects are when, you're giving a lot of V to people. And, I think sometimes it works. I think sometimes they become freaks. Sometimes they explode. It's quite a game of Russian roulette, and it's quite messy. Children tolerate it the best. The younger you are, the easier it is. And so I think Vought is looking for a way that they can inject adults, because that would be more profitable for them.
Sure. On the train in the first 3 episodes, when Huey meets Annie, there's a poster in the background for the Church of the Collective.
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys are poking fun, or at least talking about Scientology. What is that like in the writer's room in terms of, can we poke fun at them? How dangerous is this? And what's Amazon's sort of relationship on this, in terms of be careful?
I mean, no comment on whether it's Scientology or not. I will let viewers draw their own conclusions. Look, yes, some people were, especially like Craig Rosenberg. He's like, are people going to be, lurking outside my office now? And look, my overall feeling is it's bigger than any one thing is really the truth. Like, I have no problem with religion. In season 1, my problem was using religion as a profit center. I'd say my problem with a lot of, these kind of fad religions are, sooner or later the punchline is, and we need that check. And for me, that is kind of counter to what the point of these things are. They're ultimately a way to make money, and I find that really distasteful. So I tend to take target at that whenever I can.
I don't blame you. I understand, and I agree. So, and also with the boys, though, you poke fun at everything. It's not like there's just one. I mean, you are satiring and making fun of, and
I would say we're making fun of the right wing, the left wing, all the wings, celebrities, politicians. We tend to be an equal opportunity offender.
100%. But speaking about that poster that you see in the background, that brings up the subject of sort of like Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Are there things in season 2, specifically in the first 3 episodes, that maybe fans want to like look out for that they might have missed watching it the first time?
Oh, for sure. We layer in a lot of that stuff. I would pay, just off the top of my head, like I would pay careful attention to a lot of the art and posters that Huey is walking past when he's in the pawn shop. We sort of intentionally layered in many things from, without giving too much away. There's a character who will show up in season 3 who we layered in there specifically. There's a superhero named Liberty who will be an important character a few episodes down. She's advertising her special own brand of douche. Pop Claws poster is there from Terminal Beauty 3. So we layer in, because it's a show that allows us to have media everywhere. We usually, our production designer, is pretty great about being specific about layering in that media helps tell the story of where the episodes are going.
Got it. How tough was it to get Chris Hansen?
It wasn't that tough. I mean, no disrespect to Chris Hansen. I think he thought it was just like a funny idea and jumped in, and I was so happy to have him. I like, for me, like To Catch a Predator, it was such a seminal piece of like news magazine media for a lot of people my age and growing up. So to be able to have him with that voice was just awesome.
Vought originates in Nazi Germany. It's a big development in season 2. When did you guys was that early on you guys knew this arc of where it was going, and have you sort of figured out where ultimately the whole, where it's all going?
Well, to answer the first question, that Vought was using Nazi technology was one of the very first things I wanted to do. One, it's a certain amount of it is from the books.
Sure.
The character, their version of Jonah Vogelbaum was like a German scientist who then defected over here and lost his family in the concentration camps. My version, which was, a lot of the Operation Paperclip scientists, my version was a version of that, except it was bought and that he was a full-on Nazi and doing the experiments in the concentration camps. In my very, very first pitch to anybody, I pitched that detail because I thought that was such a grimy notion of how Compound V was originally developed. It was rotten from the start, and it was just tested on concentration camp prisoners by the dozens and dozens. All this human experimentation. I liked that its beginning was so rotten. And then in terms of where it all goes, as much as I know about anything, there are always cocktail napkin sketches. What we really know is we understand like the escalation of the forces and how they're heading towards kind of an ultimate showdown. Like we know a lot about that, and certain things have to twist and turn within Vought to allow that to happen. So, I know some of those, but it's a rough sketch, and it allows for, you want to leave enough room for the writers to surprise you.
Sure. Did you know when you guys were making the series that Amazon wanted to premiere the first 3 and then go weekly? Or when did that sort of come about? Because episode 3 ends on like a pretty big thing.
Yeah. No, that was by luck. That episode 3 ends on a pretty good cliffhanger. Although, not to douche it up and pat myself on the back, a lot of them do. Like we tend to try to end them on cliffhangers specifically, to promote, either binging or tuning back in the next week. That's part of it's by design, to torture the audience. The airing schedule came actually when already we were pretty close to being done. We were, probably 3/4 of the way through post-production. For the record, it didn't come from Amazon. It came from the producers. It came from me and Seth and Evan and Neil Moritz. We're the ones who pitched them, and a lot of people over there were actually reluctant because it was a new idea, or they don't do it that often, and we were kind of, we really wanted it, and Amazon ended up agreeing to give it a try. Our feeling was that, when it airs all 8 at once, it becomes such like a sugar rush of a binge. People burn through it in a week or two, and then so there's an intense amount of activity, and then it sort of fades, and then everyone's kind of off to the next thing. And
sure.
And we were like, there's so many great moments in season 2. We want to give it time to marinate so people can just like reflect on it and talk about it before they move on to the next thing, and maybe just be in the conversation a little bit longer, and also have like, I think a little anticipation for the fans is healthy. I think it helps the experience. There's a reason they call it binging. Like in the real world, that's not great. Like in the real world, you should have like a couple, good meals, and then have some time in between those meals to digest those meals. So we're hoping, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, as a fan, I actually do like the idea of it being weekly, but as someone who runs a website, I love this because you're 100% right. If it comes out on a Friday, by Tuesday, most people have injected it and are on to the next thing. And if you do it weekly, the way you're doing it, each week fans are talking about what could happen next. And it's, people are, I think for something like this, it's going to totally work.
Yeah, and I think it's just more fun. It's fun to be in the fan experience. And if you can speculate and guess and connect, my other show, Supernatural, it would probably have been an entirely different fandom had it just been binging. It's about that connection of discussion over a period of time that
Sure.
makes the experience more rewarding.
How much are you guys pulling from the comics and how much are you sort of making it your own? What's that balance of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. The things I try to get from the comics are, I try to get the characters right. I try to get the tone right, or at least my interpretation of the tone, because those are a lot of the things that I fell in love with in the first place. And then, we try to get, whenever we can, we try to get story points or references or characters or Easter eggs or lines of dialogue, even whenever we can. They're very different pieces. We're a streaming show, so we have to be serialized. The comics are quite episodic. So it proved to be very difficult to do a one-to-one in terms of just playing those stories. And also a lot of those stories just wouldn't translate just because they're different mediums. So, in terms of the plot, I would say is the big thing that's quite different, very different. But I think that ultimately was a necessity. But within that plot, we're trying to plug in as much from the original books as we can.
You have a great small bit with Seth Rogen talking about the Translucent franchise. So are you alluding to the fact that Seth and Evan are running the Translucent franchise in the movies in this world?
No. Seth is he's like the Agent Coulson of the VCU is what we've talked about. Because in season 1, he shows up in a promo for the Black Noir movie. And so now here he is in season 2 talking about his work in the Translucent movie. So he's sort of like the Clark Gregg of the VCU. He kind of connects all the way through it. So that's just like a random running joke for us.
When we spoke a while ago, and this question might be null and void by the time I air this, but you mentioned the Billy Butcher short film that will sort of the deleted scenes from episode 2 that you turn into a short film. Do you know where and when it's going to premiere? Have you figured it out yet?
It's soon after the season drops. I mean, I think we're going to release 1, 2, and 3 first, and then probably within a week or so after that. It'll be on X-Ray. So if you just hit pause on any of the episodes, you'll see a button that takes you to the Amazon X-Ray, which is sort of like DVD special features. There'll be, scene commentaries and background details on the actors, but then also this short film.
Did you say how long it is?
It's about, 7 minutes. I'm completely guessing, but it's in the 7. It's like in the 7 minute.
It's between 3 minutes and an hour.
I don't know. It's a measure of time in reality. I'll say that.
Got it. When you guys were designing season 2 and the way it started, did it almost go in a different direction? How did you discover how you wanted the season to go? And also the revealing, pulling back the curtain on Vought, or Vought, on when that was going to be revealed.
It went pretty much how we wanted it to. I mean, the first 2 months, it's really a long time on this show. The first 2 months of getting the writer's room back together, we're only talking about the mythology of the season. We spent a lot of time talking about what we think the big story is, what gets revealed, when, so we started with let's talk about Stormfront and what's her story going to be. And let's talk about, now that we know that Stan Edgar is sort of taking the place of Stillwell, Giancarlo is taking the place of Lisa Shu to kind of be the face of the corporation. And so how do they change? What, does Butcher find his wife? Does he not? Like all those questions, right? So we have notions, like I said, I'm like, I kind of want to end up here, but we talk for months about what is that story going to look like. Then once and what happened, how does every character arc, which is 12 characters. It's a lot to talk through. Then we start to look at, okay, how do we break that up into chunks and then adjust it so that each one feels like its own story, because I hate that like 8-hour movie shit. Like go see a fucking movie. Like I'm in the TV business and my job is to deliver you episodes, and episodes are supposed to be entertaining units of entertainment that then when you put them all together like a transformer, build into something else. That's the goal. And people who don't do that are not actually doing the job of making television. Sorry, but I just feel that way. So we take that big story and then we figure out, okay, how do we make smaller stories that move that ball forward on all these different fronts, which is hard. It's a lot of counterbalancing. But once you know what that big story is, then the challenge isn't so much does it go where you want it to go. The challenge is just like making sure you just execute properly.
The season opens with the Rolling Stones. How tough was it to get that song?
It wasn't. It was. We looked for a really long time. We had a lot of songs in there. I'm trying to remember some of them, but there were a lot of classic rock songs there, and none of them worked. It was frustrating. I Fleetwood Mac's Tusk at one point, I remember that one was a contender for a minute. And we were going down the road on a bunch of stuff. And then it was our music supervisors, thank God, who were like, "Hey, give this a try," because I think it's not going to be cheap, but I think we can probably swing this with the Stones. And we dropped it in, and we're like, "Oh, thank God, that's the song! Oh my God, that's so amazing! Why didn't we think of that before?" So it was from none of the like editors or me or Phil Segrisha. It was the music supervisor's big win.
You have an alt version of Spotify in your universe. Talk a little bit about how that came about, and are there alt versions, if you will, of other corporations or companies?
Oh my God, yes. So what makes Vought funny to us, or what's been a really useful running joke, is that Vought has products everywhere and everything. Funny enough, it sprung from necessity because we originally started by wanting all of these real products. We wanted Homelander to promote, Pepsi or Budweiser. Like we wanted them to be doing real product. Once in a while, you'll see a version of that. Like we'll have A-Train. We got Red Bull. Like they were the only ones who ever said yes. And so no one would say yes because the superheroes were such perverts. And so we couldn't, and we're like, well, how do we create all these commercials? And then we stumbled on, well, they're Vought products. Like we have to make Vought, it's Vought brand beer. It's Vought brand vegetables. It's they're listening to Voughtify. So everything started to become Vought products. And then it just became really funny. So like we talk, sometimes they're in the air, sometimes they make it to air, and sometimes we just haven't gotten to them yet. Like we think that there's like a Goop style line called Vautality. We think there's VNN, the channels VNN and VET and Vought Plus is
I did notice, I think you had TMZ.
We mention them. You're allowed to mention them in dialogue, but you're never allowed to show them.
Got it.
So when we show it, it's some Vought version of it. But one of my favorites is their new streaming channel, Vought Plus, that they're launching to great fanfare this year.
Is it Vaughtazon? instead of Amazon, or does Amazon exist in this?
No, we'll come up with something. There's there's Vought restaurants. There's just today, one of my writers pitched Vought burger. So it just keeps Vought just keeps expanding. Vought just keeps expanding.
Let's talk about Deep's mushroom journey.
Sure.
Yeah, you got Patton Oswalt to do the voice.
Yes.
Talk about why Patton.
I took a certain perverse pleasure that the guy who was like the lead voice in Ratatouille comes in to voice the Deep's mangina, like the guy from Secret Life of Pets 2, like a real evergreen superstar when it comes to animated voices. And for him to be like this kind of animated male vagina on this guy's chest, it was really hilarious to me, man. It just really made me laugh. It really felt like we were trying to actively ruin his career as a voiceover artist. He reached out to me. That was around when season 1 premiered, and he reached out to just on Twitter to just say how much he loved the show, and I'm such a big fan of his. And he said, I'd love to play a part one way or another if it ever comes up. And that's always a mistake to say to me, because I'll always say, well, it's funny you should ask that, because I have an amazing part for you, and you could just come into the booth, in the valley, and you bang it out in a couple hours. And God bless him, he was willing to do it, and was more excited when I said, well, you'll actually be playing the Deep's gills. A lot of actors would say, I'm actually busy that year, I can't do it. But he was like, oh my God, that's the best. I'm so in. And he's a really, really good dude.
Talk about how you filmed the gills on him, because it looks great.
It was really complicated. He has prosthetic gills that are put on him that were beautifully wrought. But those are mostly for like kind of wide shots, or shots that the gills aren't moving, or if he's running towards the door and you catch like a little corner of one. That's mostly what those are for. All the times that they're talking, those are a completely CG element. And Stephen Fleet, our VFX coordinator, spent so much time, and as did I, because they're all just basically scanned onto Chase's skin. But one, they have to speak, we had to record Patton very early so that we could sync the lips to him. And then every stupid conversation of like, does one speak at a time? Do they all speak at once? Do the lower ones talk to the upper ones? Like, how wet are they? Should they be spitting, because they're so mucusy? And like these intense conversations where you're fine tuning almost by the pixel of spending so much time and effort and so much love and care on something so ridiculously fucking stupid is exactly why I make this show.
So one of the things that I love, and for me, is watching you sort of poke fun at the entire junket situation and people doing press. It might be a little inside baseball for people that are watching it that are like, that can't be what it's really like, but that's really what it's like. And you show it in the first few episodes. So sort of talk about trying to sort of shine a light on what these press junkets are really like, the insanity that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the show in its own way, one of the elements about it that we love is it's a very inside baseball show. Like, we made a decision very early on that we were really going to get deep in the weeds in just details of how show business works, but never explain it to the audience. So we're always talking about like ratings points and demos and, and prices per share and never giving context for any of it. because that's how it really happens, and we wanted it to feel authentic. So for this season, we said, well, we should do a junket because that's a very inside baseball thing, and show it, very realistically, which is what a junket is, you all gather at one particular location, and like dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of press show up. And the idea being is, instead of different interviews on different days, you have like 48 hours of 14-hour interviews a day, and you're running through, the interviewer comes in, they ask 5 minutes of questions, they go. Someone else comes in, they ask 5 minutes of questions, they go. And it goes on and on and on. And through no fault of their own, but everyone wants to know the exact same things. And so you're asked the exact same questions like 300 times in a row, and by the end you don't even know what you're saying anymore. You're just speaking whatever that like first question was, and just whatever your robotic response is to that answer, and that's really how it goes. And so we wanted to just show that, but we do it for all aspects of the business. Like, one thing I'm really proud of is, it's an upcoming episode, but it's not spoiling anything, is, we show them filming a movie, and we took great pains to make that a very, very realistic movie shoot. Like, even if you're listening to all the extras in the background, they're all saying very realistic movie things, because again, it helps with the authenticity.
How often are the seven actually fighting crime? Because one of the things that I've learned watching the show is that they're busy filming movies, TV series, promotional appearances, attending premieres, and never fighting.
I mean, I had a notion in the beginning, it didn't quite pan out, but I had a notion in the beginning, was like, I wanted to go through the whole series and none of them ever fought crime once. Like, that was my original goal. Where it kind of landed is, they occasionally are sent by crime analytics off on a save that is meant to be recorded and to further polish their brand, or to get themselves out of a tight scrape if they need to change the subject of some scandal they're in. And but they're never just out on patrol. They're sent by a group of keyboard masters who are really looking through all the surveillance footage and imagery, and they're meant to just go to a place, stand in a place, stop a villain, have someone film it, and then they get to be on the 6 o'clock news. So almost never, I would say almost never.
Got it. You reveal the Compound V. It comes out very in the first 3 episodes. For a lot of series, that could have been a season finale moment where the Compound V, it's the last episode and it comes out and boom, what's the next season going to be? But it's right in episode 3. Was there ever any talk about pushing that to being a season finale moment?
Certainly not seriously among the writers. The Compound V thing, it's a pretty good card trick, which you always look for when you're writing a season, because it's something that really feels like a big deal, to the audience, but it's actually not a big deal at all because every main character already knew about it. Or 80% of them, like maybe Noir and Maeve didn't know, but like every other character knew. And so it didn't actually affect the story at all. The boys would keep doing what they were doing. The 7 would keep doing what they were doing by and large. So it gave we specifically looked at it as, well, let's make it feel really huge and let's do it way earlier than anyone's expecting, because it'll feel like a really big deal, but it's actually not a big deal at all. It's an illusion that it's a big deal, because it doesn't change the story one iota. The big things are the things that change the story. That's why I save things for, like, Ryan's alive, and Becca's alive. Like, I save those for ends of season because that changes everything, and I need time to think about how that's going to change everything. Vought, everyone knowing about Vought was a cool way to, you know, to have a shocker in the middle of an episode, but it didn't change anything.
I understand. There is in episode 3, there's that bit where Homelander throws his son off of the roof. I think it's episode 3. Maybe it's 2.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's 3.
And so was there a lot of talk about what Homelander was going to do to try to turn his powers on? You know, was there ever a thought of shooting him? Was there a thought of, you know, how did it end up being that?
That was also Craig Rosenberg, who comes up with all of our most twisted shit. I don't remember there ever being another pitch. I remember always from the beginning there was this idea that he pushes his son off a roof. The only thing that was different was we talked about, you know how like there's always those moments in superhero stories where like someone falls and you're looking over and it's empty air and you think they're dead or something, and then they suddenly fly up. You know, we were joking around that like Homelander, there was a version of it at one point where Homelander was expecting that moment where like he like pushed him off, and then there was like a lot of pause and he was waiting for him to fly up, and then he looks over and he sees the sprawled, like, you know, unconscious body on the ground. So I think that inspired us, that sort of classic superhero moment when every character learns to fly. They always seem to fall and then we think they're in trouble and then they fly up magically. We were playing with that, but somewhere in the process we decided that actually watching the child fall off the roof and impact with the ground would be the crazier shot, and so we went with that.
My last thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is one of the biggest things in the first 3 episodes, is the whale sequence. It's obviously bloody as fuck. It is crazy what you put the actors through. How long did it actually take to film that thing? And because you are dousing everyone with blood, it's not like a little bit. It is. Right. It's a lot. Is there ever the actors like, are you serious? We're doing this for 4 days or 5 days?
Well, crazy enough, if I remember correctly, the actual bit with the whale was really hard because there was storms when we were doing all the water stuff, and a couple of days we actually couldn't go. It wasn't safe to go out in the water, and we would have to scramble and change our schedule around last second. So, and if I remember correctly, you know, there's a lot of different parts of that sequence. You know, the boat racing towards shore is its own full day with a helicopter. Our director, Steve Boyum, you know, riding shotgun in the helicopter, who's, you know, fun fact of Steve Boyum is he was one of the surfers in Apocalypse Now, and he still carries that. Like, you almost picture Ride of the Valkyries is in his head as he's jamming. He's just a madman, and brilliant. But so there was that day, and then if I remember correctly, the exterior whale was only 1 day of just, you know, them climbing out of the whale, and then all the superheroes showing up to the whale. The boat going into the whale. Then inside the whale, we actually, because I think we could only be on that beach for 1 day. So then inside the whale, we had to break down the whale, you know, and then take its innards, the middle section that had all its innards, and drive that to the stage, and then film the rest of it on the stage, covered when they were most covered in all of their wet and goo. So I think it was a 3-day deal, all in, and it's awful. That all that blood it's sticky and it's gross, and you're in it all day. When you're outside, it attracts bees because there's so much sugar in it. So like, imagine smothering yourself with strawberry jelly and then sitting in it all day, and that's a pretty solid version of what they have to go through. But I think, you know, I think they know what they signed on for, and that's all I can say.
100%. But you also, in the inside of the whale, you have the heart, you have the guts. I mean, it's brutal and it looks awesome on on screen.
Yeah. I mean, if Arv Graywall, the production designer, he wanted it to be anatomically correct, so there was, he didn't want to make it a joke. So there was a lot of discussion of like what cavity in the whale is big enough to allow all of these characters to play these scenes, and we finally landed that, well, if the boat goes through and punctures the lungs, a whale's lungs are enormous, and so a collapsed lung would create just a massive space. So that's what we did.
Was it always going to be a whale, or was it almost something else?
It's always going to be a whale. Craig Rosenberg was like, he really wanted to top the dolphin, and he was always pitching a whale. One thing was, because originally, I'll tell you this, now that I remember, it's okay, I have a couple more minutes, then we'll go. We'll have this be the last question. But one thing I remember is originally they were going to hide Kenji in like a safe house in the city somewhere, and then they were going to escape because I think the Deep or some of the superheroes were after them, and they were going to be driving just like in New York along the water. It was at the West Side Highway, and just driving, trying to escape. It was a car thing. And then the whale was going to come out of the water and beach itself on the highway in front of them. And then they were going to drive through the whale. That was the original pitch. And I kept saying, like, I don't understand it. Like, the highway is so far from the water, like the jump that it would have to make and the size, and like, there's just smarter. Well, why not pull down a bridge? Like, there's just so many smarter ways to block them. That I was like not into the whale pitch. And then like, I think we came up with the idea that they're hiding on a boat, because we're like, well, we need them somewhere isolated to hide. And I think we came up with the boat because that would make the whale work. I think the whale wagged the tail of that whole episode. On
that note, I'm going to say that thank you for talking to me for 6 hours. And
it was so fun.
And no, seriously, the first 3 episodes are great. I can't wait to talk to you about more. And seriously, have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, sounds good, buddy. Thank you so much.